I would like to talk about the rise of Austria and Prussia today. So I'll have pictures, I'll have notes, and I will attach this again to my website and to Moodle. So the rise of Austria and Prussia. Now remember, we are talking about absolutism, and we are talking about those 6 themes of absolutism. We've talked about Louis XIV. We understand where his success was. We understand that he was the model that these absolute leaders were trying to follow. Well, Austria and Prussia are a little bit different. They are in Eastern Europe. They have continual warfare. They finally finished the 30 Years' War. They have to deal with Eastern Asian invaders, which would be your Ottoman Empire. And therefore, they're agricultural. They're not Western Europe, they're agricultural. They still have serfdom. They don't have major cities. They're not very urbanized. It's a very different situation in Eastern Europe. So, what does this mean? This means that there was continual wartime emergencies, reduced political power of landlord nobility, and yet landed nobility retained power over their serfs. So what we're going to look at is Austria and Prussia separately and together. So to start together, the 3 areas that the monarchs did take control of when we look at our 6 centralizing themes are: first, they imposed and collected permanent taxes without consent, meaning they didn't go through a parliament or an estate or any kind of representatives. Secondly, they maintained permanent standing armies, and these permanent standing armies were used to police their country and fight abroad. And third, they conducted relations with other states as they pleased. Now, in the end, Prussia and Austria are going to do things a little bit differently, but in the end, royal absolutism created in Prussia was going to be stronger and more effective than royal absolutism established in Austria. And we'll talk about those reasons why. So we're going to start with Austria. Here's your Austrian Empire in 1657 to 1718. Now remember, Austria, that is your Habsburgs, that is your Charles V, those are your Catholics. Well, we know that Austria is a part of that Holy Roman Empire, but we know after the 30 Years' War that that idea of the Holy Roman Empire is still there, but there's not really a power. Those 300 German states, they've become pretty autonomous. They have their own religions. They're not necessarily tied. But we know that the Habsburgs are the hereditary rulers. So here is your Austrian Empire. You have Austria, you have Tyrol, you have Bohemia, Austria, Tyrol, this area, they're your German speakers. Bohemia, they're your Czech speakers. And then you have the continuation of the Austrian Empire into Hungary. So you have 3 very distinct areas that we're going to be looking at today. So Austria and the Ottoman Turks. So after the 30 Years' War, again, Peace of Westphalia in 1648, Austria was impoverished and exhausted. We talked about the loss of life and all of the rest. The Habsburg hereditary emperors of the ancient Holy Roman Empire, they were German speakers, yet they also held this variety of hundreds of separate political jurisdictions, independent cities. The defeat, though, in Central Europe, so if we go back to the map, the defeat of the Ottoman Empire, remember, they were only as strong as they could add territory. They got all the way up to Vienna at one point. Charles V was able to push them back. But as they are becoming defeated in the Ottoman Empire, it's opening up more area in that part of Europe. And so that's the part of Europe that Austria is going to expand into. Austria is not going to be able to expand going north because those are those 300 independent German states. And there's really nothing more they can do in those areas. So what we're going to talk about is the 3 parts of this Austrian Empire. The 3 parts are the provinces of Austria, Bohemia, and Hungary. So here's your big Holy Roman Emperor, Leopold I, isn't he a beaut? He reigned from 1658 to 1705. And again, here is another image, and I like this one because you see all those different states of the Holy Roman Empire. Again, Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, they are all part of that Austrian Empire. The Austrian Empire is a part of the Holy Roman Empire, but I would argue that the Holy Roman Empire is only an empire in name only. So the 3 parts of this Austria, Bohemia, we know Bohemia. We know that that was the first part of the 30 Years' War. We know that the Protestant holdings, when the Catholics won that first phase of the 30 Years' War, they took away all the Protestant holdings and gave them to these loyal Catholic princes in Bohemia. They also gave them to any of the soldiers that weren't Bohemian, they weren't Czech speakers, and they gave that land to those people, foreigners, this new nobility. They took control of the serfed peasants, and they stamped out Protestantism. And so what happened in Bohemia was the power that was in Bohemia after the 30 Years' War owed their allegiance to the Habsburg emperors. Remember, it sounds like Louis XIV. His nobles of the robe owed their allegiance to Louis. And that's going to be a really important piece when you're talking about centralization. The second group was those hereditary German-speaking provinces of Austria, Styria, Tyrol. They have a permanent standing army. They put down internal opposition. So again, those 6 themes. And third, you have Hungary and Transylvania, which is our current Romania. They're going to be conquered in 1699. Turkish wars strengthened the Habsburg army and promoted a sense of unity in this Habsburg lands. So again, if we go back to that map, we're talking about these 3 areas: Bohemia, the Czech speakers, Austria, the German speakers, and Hungary. So 3 very distinct territories, which is going to make it very difficult to be an absolute ruler. Now, how are they tied together? They're tied together through their common ruler, the Habsburg, but each has its own laws, its own political life, and nobles that dominate. Because again, when you're looking at these areas, they're very rural. They have serfs. The nobles are going to be a part of this team. And so it's not going to be an absolute, it's going to almost be a partnership. All right, and now we're going to switch gears and we're going to compare this Austria, Bohemia, Hungary, this Austrian Empire to what's happening in Prussia. So Austria, again, one more thing about Austria. Austria is going to be limited. They're going to be limited because they're not going to be as strong due to the vastness of their territory. All right, now Prussia. Prussia is a fun one. Prussia is going to consist of 3 very separate areas. So you have Brandenburg, you have the Prussian estates over here, and then you have the East Prussian estates over here. So we have 3 different disjointed areas. So again, is this going to be a problem? Of course it is. 3 disconnected land masses in Western and Central Eastern Germany. They were ruled by the Hohenzollern family. I mean, this area, no natural frontiers, sand and swamps, got just decimated during the 30 Years' War, as you recall. Huge amounts of deaths by the Swedish and by the Habsburgs. So how did they rise to this great European power within the next 100 years? Again, absolutism. So when we talk about Prussia, we want to think, how did these 3 disconnected territories become a power, a great power to rival Austria, to rival France, to rival England? So what did they do? They started with the Frederick William the Great Elector, 1640 to 1688. He sets up a general war commissariat. He sets up an agency, a bureaucracy. They levy taxes for the army. They oversee the growth and training of the army. It was an agency for civil government. He built a standing army of 40,000 men by 1678. He does not rule a very big country. And yet he has 40,000 men in his military. Now he also, like Louis, like Austria, has to deal with their nobles. Now in Prussia, they're called the Junkers. The Junkers are the Prussian nobles, and he has to make a deal. He makes a tactic deal. He makes a deal with these Junkers in exchange for full control over their peasants. So the Junkers are completely in control of their peasants. Frederick William is not going to get involved. The Junkers served as officials in the commissariat and officers in the army, and they were exempt from taxes. So what did Frederick get? He got people to buy into the military. He got to have a free hand in running his country. Yet what did the nobles get? They got to run their estates. Remember, this is agricultural, rural Eastern Europe. So what does that mean socially? It means that serfdom was reinforced and mercantilist policies were added. So again, when we look at this, we think 6 centralizing themes? Absolutely. We got military, right? We've got dealing with the nobles and mercantilist policy. So there is King Frederick the First of Prussia. He actually ruled a little bit later, 1713. And King Frederick the First of Prussia, he's going to be your first actual king. So Frederick the Great Elector, he was a part of the Holy Roman Emperor, but King Frederick is going to go to Leopold, Leopold being the Holy Roman Emperor, and he's going to or the Archduke of Austria in the Holy Roman Empire, and he's going to convince Frederick is going to convince Leopold to allow Prussia to be ruled as a kingdom. This now, why would Austria let Prussia go? There's a reason. This agreement was given in exchange for an alliance against Louis XIV of France in the War of Spanish Succession. So remember, these guys they're building their armies, they're centralizing their countries, but they're also fighting in wars. Frederick's argument was that Prussia had never belonged to the Holy Roman Empire, and therefore was no legal or political barrier to prevent the Elector of Brandenburg from being the king in Prussia. And so he's going to continue on. Now we're going to talk later on about some of our later princes or kings of Prussia and how powerful they get, like Frederick the Great. And here's your Europe. So again, what do you need to know? You need to know that Brandenburg Prussia is centralizing. It's going to look very, very different than France, Louis XIV. It's going to look very different. Austria is also centralizing, but theirs is going to be closer to Prussia, but further than France. So they all have their own story to tell, but because of their regions that they're in, because of the situations, the amount of land that they have, because of their rural or industrial background, it makes for a different absolute government.